Nairps, the Editor-in-Chief of Skift Meetings, and in this episode of the Skift Meetings podcast, I get to speak with Gabriel Seder, Vice President Global Development at Destinations International. Our core topic is the future of destination organizations, and we discuss things like the evolving role of destination organizations, the destination marketing versus management debate. We talk about the important role of destination organizations in advocating for the business events industry. We talk about why authentic travel experiences are top of mind for destination organizations. And we talk about why destination organizations must be able to clearly communicate the value that they provide. Hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and don't forget to check out the other episodes of the podcast. Now for a word from our sponsors, PHL Life Sciences, a division of the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau. Host your convention or trade show in Philadelphia, one of America's leading life sciences hubs. PHL Life Sciences, the first and only CVB division of its kind, will connect you to the professionals at the forefront of your industry and to a culture you can only find in Philadelphia, a city known for its rich history that's forging a bright future. Philadelphia challenges the expected and defies convention. A world of discovery is waiting. Visit phlife.com to learn more. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Skift Meetings podcast. And today I am delighted to have with me Gabriel Seder, the Vice President Global Development at Destinations International. Goes by Gabe. Gabe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Miguel. Really happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation to come on and talk with you today.
Looking forward to it. So, Gabriel, we've kind of met recently, got to know each other a little bit, but I wanted to start by asking you to introduce yourself. And I'd love to start from the point of kind of where you got to know the meetings industry, the destination kind of industry from this kind of business events perspective. Start wherever you want to start, but take us through to where you are today.
Yeah, happy to speak to that, Miguel. I think like a lot of people in the industry, I arrived here through a bit of a circuitous route and came really through the tourism side rather than business events. I worked for a number of years, sort of out of school, for an agency that worked specifically in tourism and tourism development in destination marketing. So I started off with marketing and did that through an agency for a number of years, and then moved into the consulting side and worked specifically on destination development. And we focused on tourism development as a driver for international development objectives. And so we would work with international donors on programs around biodiversity conservation or economic development, but focused very much on tourism sector. And so through that work, had the opportunity to work in a great many emerging destinations, or destinations that were really exploring opportunities with tourism. Had the opportunity to work establishing DMOs or starting or working with really early stage DMOs. And kind of moved from there into focusing on the DMO and destination space, and moved over to Destinations International about 3.5 years ago. I had the opportunity to meet Jack Johnson, who leads our advocacy team, and he asked me to join. So I made that jump in February of 2020, just a couple of weeks before the pandemic. And so, when I reflect on my time at DI, I was there in the office for about 2 or 3 weeks before really the pandemic set in. We all went remote, and it's been a bit of a topsy-turvy adventure ever since.
This is definitely an interesting time. And where are you based at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm sitting in my home office here in Seattle, Washington. I moved here with my wife about 18 months ago. We're working remote. DI went remote during the pandemic, and I've been in DC for about 15 years. And with the onset of remote work and our remote team, we had the opportunity to kind of take a step back and yeah, say, is this where we want to be, and decided to make a move here. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm based in Denmark. We're also fully remote on the Skift side, so we're kind of on different sides of the planet, but also have that freedom, which is great. I saw in your background there's a lot of sustainability work as well, and kind of working in different parts of the world. I can see Liberia, Jamaica. It sounds like you've been to some pretty interesting places, and this was all kind of setting up tourism projects in all parts of the world.
Yeah, well, everything, it's tourism would be kind of the red thread that would run through all of these different programs, but it was a fairly diverse mix of projects that I had the opportunity to work on. So, for example, you mentioned Liberia, and it was one of the last projects that I worked on before I did jump over to DI was a program looking at opportunities to develop tourism in protected areas in Liberia. So looking at a couple of areas that were the early stages of development of protected areas of national parks, and looking at how you create tourism assets there, attract investment, looking at protected area management, concession systems, and so on. Just an absolutely fascinating project, in a destination that has very, very little tourism infrastructure, obviously, and so it has its own set of challenges, but obviously, fascinating work. And had an opportunity to work in a lot of other destinations as well. You mentioned Jamaica, which obviously has a booming visitor economy, but we're looking at how to involve sort of non-traditional actors in the visitor economy, working in the interior of the island, working with communities, looking to expand that visitor economy and the value chain of the industry, to include some of these disadvantaged populations in the country, which obviously was interesting and rewarding and challenging work as well.
Fascinating. I think that could be a whole other podcast episode, but let's stick to the matters at hand. Quick question: how do you explain to family and friends who are not involved in the industry what you do in your current role?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm always curious how your other guests respond to that question as well. And I will admit that the explanation changes a little bit depending on who I'm talking with, and their level of familiarity with the industry, and so on. But it's typically fairly easy to explain that DI, Destinations International, is the trade association that represents destinations around the world. And so we advocate on behalf of destination organizations. We provide professional development resources for destination sales and marketing professionals, and we create and nurture a community of destination professionals around the world. And then my role there as VP of Global Development is to think about how we truly live up to that big I in our name, that international, and think about what are our strategies for global growth in terms of membership, in terms of partnership, and the value proposition that we have. How do we build a more global and inclusive audience and community? How are we ensuring that the content that we produce speaks to global audiences? How do we provide tools and resources that cross borders and develop a value proposition for a global community of destination professionals?
Very interesting. So I want to start a little bit from the top when it comes to Destinations International, DI for short. I think most people are used to that acronym, but who are the members? How many members do you have? How does it work on a very basic level?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that DI has been around for more than 100 years. Yep. And I probably should know the exact number, maybe 106 or 108 years or so. And we've been doing our annual convention for more than 100 years. During that time, we've gone through a few different identities, from the International Association of Convention Bureaus and Convention and Visitor Bureaus to DMAI and now DI. But through that time, of course, the core identity has been the same. For a lot of that time, we were focused on North America. Obviously, grew out of the U.S. and the Midwest specifically. But over the past decade or so, have really taken a step back and thought about what it means to truly be a global organization, and to prioritize that in terms of the work that we do, both internally, but also the content that we produce, and the value that we bring to the industry. Um, we've got about 700 destination members, so we are a membership organization, and the majority of those are based in North America. We've got maybe about 500 or so members that are based in the US, and a really strong cohort in Canada as well, and then a growing international membership base as well. And then we work very closely with our partners. That could be media, vendors, marketing agencies, and so on. Work very closely with them as well, and our business members. At the core, we're a membership association for destination organizations.
Fascinating, and I think definitely one of the longest standing organizations in our sector. So always good to kind of understand that. You mentioned DMAI, so I think when I first got involved in the industry, it was called DMAI, so Destinations Marketing Association International. Association. Right? Yep. Yeah, exactly right. So I guess the big change there is the dropping of the marketing. And I wondered if you could expand on that a little bit, because is marketing a sort of dirty term, or is it just that destinations or these organizations that represent destinations feel like they do more than marketing?
Yeah, good question. And, I think, no, marketing is certainly not a dirty word. I wouldn't say that at all. It's kind of funny. So there's always been this question, okay, DMO, is marketing, is that management, is it a destination marketing organization, is it a destination management organization? We hear sometimes people talk about DMMO, destination marketing and management organization, and trying to encapsulate, or articulate exactly what it is that organization does. We will kind of sidestep that question entirely. And so we don't talk about DMOs at all. We just talk about destination organizations. And it doesn't matter if you're a tourist board, or you're a convention bureau, or you're a CBB, or a state tourism office, or a national organization. You're, at the end of the day, a destination organization. And I think that does a few things. I think that recognizes that all organizations are involved to some degree in both marketing and management, whatever that means. And it allows us to maybe set aside the semantic discussion and just focus on, at the core, what is that organization? And I think that's reflected in our name as well. So we did, as you mentioned, went through a bit of a rebrand about eight or so years ago, where we did drop the M entirely, and rather than Destination Marketing Association International, became simply Destinations International.
I mean, I know you're kind of sidestepping it, so I hope you don't mind the question, but is this a reflection on the idea that these organizations are doing more than just kind of trying to sell a destination? They have some responsibility or some ability to also feed back and be part of those communities and those places. It sounds like you're saying, hey, we can't just sit here and sell whatever we have, but we can actually be a part of building that.
Yeah, of course. And certainly not trying to evade that question at all. And I think, as we kind of dig into the conversation a bit as well, we've got a good deal of data to back that up. This idea of the destination organization's scope expanding beyond simply sales and marketing is something that has been a reality for a long time, certainly as long as I've worked in the industry. There's always been this question of marketing versus management. So there's, without a doubt, that's part of the mandate of our members, and it's an increasing percentage of the work that they do as well. We put out a good deal of research, like I mentioned, including, I think we'll maybe talk about the Destinations Next Future study that we released recently as well. And that's really the major narrative that comes out of that piece of research, which is that the role of the destination organization in the kind of the supply side of the equation. So you've got, your demand side, the marketing, and then the supply side, the product itself within the destination. And the role of the destination organization that touches that supply side is an ever growing, let's say, piece of the mix, and a growing priority for the destination organizations, and certainly something that our members spend an awful lot of time thinking about, and kind of demanding that we focus on as well.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a lot of work to do. Do you have any specific examples that you can think of when an organization is able to do that, is able to really kind of go back into the community and have more of a management role that you think has kind of shifted things?
Yeah, of course, for sure. Where do you even start with that? I think maybe first and foremost is the role of advocates for the industry, and the role that the destination organization takes on within their community, to be the entity that speaks on behalf of the industry. So how does the destination organization elevate and communicate the impact that the industry has on the community? How does that destination organization get in front of policymakers, and have a seat at the table where decisions are being made to make sure that the industry is being reflected? So, that I think is kind of an obvious example, but just one of many. You could talk about the role of the destination organization in reflecting the community within the industry. So sort of the inverse of what I'm talking about as well, and saying, okay, how are we ensuring that the needs and the expectations of the community are being reflected in terms of the industry, and in terms of the product that's being developed, and the product obviously that's being marketed, where they've got direct control over that, and ensuring that the product that is being marketed is true and authentic and reflects the place, and reflects a place that's fair and equitable, from a social lens as well. And then of course, there's the much more, say, tangible or kind of literal ways that the destination organizations involved in destination development, and workforce development, ensuring that workers are being attracted and retained and upskilled, having a seat at the table when decisions are being made in terms of infrastructure investments, attracting investment into the destination, questions of access, connectivity, inclusivity, like I mentioned as well.
This is not a simple task. There's a lot going on here. So, okay, let's jump into the research that you're doing, because obviously I think these destination organizations can potentially have a huge impact, right? Not just in selling the destination, but also kind of with their own communities. And so one of the ways you're kind of enabling them to do this is through the research that you do, right? And I know you mentioned the Destination Next Future Study Report. This comes out every 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, or has done for the last like kind of sort of time period. And so you've just released a 2023 future study. Could you give me sort of your overview, and particularly the things that you found interesting or surprising that you think would be interesting for our readers?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So the future study, like you mentioned, comes out every 2 years. This is a project which, for the past 4 or 5 iterations, we've worked with our partners at MMGY, Next Factor. So in particular, Paul Lamette and Greg Oates, formerly of Skift, as you may know, who have been tremendous partners of ours, and really do an awful lot of the heavy lifting in terms of collecting the data and helping us sort through the data. So certainly need to acknowledge the work that they're doing, and of course their invaluable contributions to the future study. That said, the study is based on a survey, and it's a global survey of destination professionals. It's something we're very, very proud of. It's by far our most ambitious and most global in scope, in terms of the research that we do. This year we had more than 800 respondents in about 60 different countries. So really reflects, I think, a really robust global voice. And what we do is assemble panels of experts from the industry and then from adjacent industries as well. So we've got, for example, our disruptors panel, which consists of technology companies, innovative companies that are working in that space. We've got our community panel, which consists of public sector stakeholders, our industry panel of associations, and so on. And then, of course, we've got the destinations themselves. We've put together a global advisory group of about 20 different individuals that help reflect the industry in their different regions of the world, and then help push out the survey, of course, to their networks. And so working through these different panels, we're able to ensure that we've got a diversity of voices and also a fairly strong reach in terms of the survey itself.
This is a big survey. I mean, we do surveys and we do reports, but this is a big survey. I mean, just having that kind of the amount of respondents and the depth that you go into is very impressive. And it's all available for free to download on the website, right? So anybody who's interested can kind of go and check it out.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's all available on the website. And so what we're able to do, with that data, is really two things. So we look at aggregating trends, sort of macro level trends that are affecting the industry, affecting the destinations, of course, specifically. And then we look at strategies that the destinations are pursuing to address those trends or mitigate those trends or capitalize on those trends, as the case may be. And then we look at ranking those trends and ranking those strategies relative to each other. And so we're able to kind of arrive at, a top 5 or top 10 or top 50 or 100, depending on the size of the scope that you're looking at.
And how do you do that? I mean, do you just ask in the survey? Because it seems you have to kind of identify in this case, the top 50 and then rank them. So those are two separate exercises?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we rely on those panels that I mentioned before to actually identify the trends themselves. And so, they'll look at, you name it, the role of AI, for instance, or, different trends, obviously, identify those. Then we go out with the survey and speak to the destinations to actually rank and qualify those standards relative to each other.
Yeah, I looked through the trends and the strategies, and the first thing that stands out to me is, AI is the top trend, and it's a new one as well, right? Or it's not a new one, but it kind of went up a huge amount this year, which is not surprising. It's sort of on everybody's mind. But then when it comes to strategies, the first one to mention AI is number 43. So, just from there, I kind of deduced that AI is on top of everybody's mind, but nobody's quite figured out how to make it work for them. Is that sort of your understanding? I'm not asking this as a sort of AI expert, but just sort of what you're reading kind of here in the trends and the strategies.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And like any survey, there's always a bit of bias. As a result of a few things. I think in this case, it's just a result of when the survey was actually in the field, and certainly coincided with an awful lot of media around ChatGPT-4 had recently come out, as well as any number of generative AI tools that were taking not just the industry by storm, but really anybody that was paying attention to the news. And so that's certainly rocketed, like you said, to the top of our list. I think in the last time that we had done this survey about 2 years before, yes, AI was on the radar. I think it was maybe like 80th out of 100 trends or something. So near the bottom. And of course, like you mentioned, this year it was at the very top. So I think your analysis is pretty good. I think everybody is aware of AI, aware of the potential that it has, and I think casting around looking for opportunities to capitalize on that, but maybe not totally clear what that looks like, at least beyond the sort of obvious applications. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see it at the top of the strategies, but excuse me, at the top of the trends, but relatively few strategies to actually address that trend.
Are you ready to celebrate your successes in the world of meetings and events? The Skift Meetings Awards are back for 2024, recognizing the most innovative business events companies across 15 categories, and we want you to be a part of it. Winners will feature on Skift Meetings, sending a clear signal to events professionals around the world that these are partners they can rely on. The final deadline for submissions is June 11th. We encourage you to start your submission today to secure the best entry rates. For more information and to start your submission, head to live.skift.com.
So let's talk a little bit about the other trends we're seeing there. I can see at the top an authentic travel experience. I can see this engaging with the locals and visitors at a destination. Sustainability and regeneration also comes at pretty high up, and also this alignment with government and community. Any surprises there? Anything that you'd kind of highlight as something that you think is I guess more important than any of the others?
Yeah, I think of those, the one thing that I think is very interesting is that this number two trend. So the trend that these hundreds and hundreds of survey respondents said after AI is the most important trend in the industry, like you said, is this idea that customers are increasingly seeking a unique, authentic travel experience, and that has been at the top of the rankings for the past several surveys. So this is something that really hasn't moved. I think that the strategies in terms of how destinations are actually addressing that are changing. But I think it's important, and it's certainly a key takeaway for us to remember at the end of the day that everything else that we do is in service of this. It's creating a product that consumers demand. This idea that travelers, whether you're talking about leisure or business events, as your listeners know that these customers are savvy, and that their demands are changing, and that at the end of the day, this idea of authenticity, this idea of uniqueness is key. And for the destination marketers, being able to lean into that and being able to speak to those kind of core assets of your destination that speak to this demand for authenticity are important. And I think one way to think about this, which Greg Oates, I was listening to speak the other day, and he makes the point that he always says. It says every destination in Europe, for instance, has a convention center, and it's got a 12th century church, right? And so it's difficult to market these physical assets. And so it's how do you get to the core of the destination? How do you get to the identity? How do you get to the community itself? And reflect that in a way that speaks to consumers and speaks to your travelers, that sets you apart. And I think that's what's being reflected in this trend here.
Excellent. I think that makes sense. And I think it's an excellent trend. Of course, it's not new, but it's something that continues to be a challenge, particularly on the marketing side. Now, shifting over to the strategies. So top, a new one, you have protect revenue sources to maintain current funding levels. And I saw some data in the report that I thought was quite interesting. And this idea that, I think it's LATAM or South and Latin America is probably the area of the world where destinations are more at risk for funding in terms of political shifts. Anything like that could really kind of wipe out the funding for a destination organization. I think the overall percentage is about 37%, which I think is interesting in itself. So over a third of these organizations are kind of at danger of having their funding run out. How does DI kind of help these organizations deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. And you're right. And, that's reflected in the report as well. Like you said, that this number one strategy that respondents are pursuing revolves around this idea of protecting revenue, reflecting this sort of anxiety around budget cuts, and so on. And that's universal as well. You're right to point out that there's certain regions where that reporting rate was slightly higher than others, but that was consistently around 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 survey respondents let us know that they've got serious concerns that that there's budget cuts coming, or at least the risk of budget cuts. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of that is rooted in the ability or the inability of a destination organization to communicate what it is that it does. First and foremost, maybe to policymakers, but really to any number of stakeholders. I mentioned that this idea of advocacy and this idea of destination organizations advocating for themselves and advocating on behalf of the industry is something that's becoming more and more important, and something that's more and more valued by the industry. And I think at the end of the day, this idea of protecting funding is directly tied to the idea of being able to communicate the value that you have, and not just the economic impact or not just the ROI that you have. I mean, yes, obviously it's important to be able to speak to that, but going beyond just the direct economic impact that the destination organization has in the community, being able to speak to the value of protecting the destination brand, being able to speak to the value of attracting talent to the destination, the impact, the legacy of the meetings and events that are attracted to the destination, the value of the industry in general is crucially important. And that's something that we spend an awful lot of time thinking about as an association and working with our members on, is how do we make them more effective advocates for themselves? How do we help them tell the story of the work that they do? How do we help them connect with stakeholders in order to communicate the value of the industry and the direct role that they have in that? And so that's, obviously something that we spend an awful lot of time working on.
It sounds like data and research are important tools in doing that, right? And I assume that's one of the reasons why you provide all this research for free and kind of share it widely with your members.
Yeah, research and tools is certainly part of it, no doubt about it. But a lot of it comes back to the strategy of just building stronger relationships with stakeholders. What are you doing to go out to your stakeholders, and not just policymakers, but the industry, to residents, to the community itself, and build those relationships. And so again, this idea of relationship building, of advocacy is really core to who we are and the work that we do.
Excellent. And I know you have a diagnostic tool as well that's sort of connected to the Destination Next, the studies. Could you just explain how that works and who that's for?
Sure. Yeah, of course. The Destination Next future study is sort of one part of a two-piece resource. So the data from the future study also feeds into our assessment tool. So the DNext assessment tool does two things. It looks at, say, the strengths and opportunities of the destination itself. And so it's got a number of variables that look at the product itself within the destination, and is able to kind of chart that and look at opportunities for strengthening the product itself. And then at the same time, it looks at the destination organization, which obviously is charged with marketing or managing those assets, and the same way uses a kind of a whole number of variables to quantify the strength of the destination organization itself. And so that tool, that resource, is updated every 2 years to reflect the data that comes out of the future study. And then that's something that's available to any destination to participate in, and to participate in that assessment. And then we're able to do workshops and dig into that data with the destination organizations as well.
Excellent. So that kind of comes full circle, and it's all based on that data. So that makes a lot of sense. So wanted to think about challenges in the industry, of course. And there's a lot of challenges that came up in these trends and these strategies that you have in the report. But if you could pick one challenge that you think is the biggest challenge for our industry as a whole, what would that be? And how would you think about addressing it?
Yeah. So I think that at the end of the day, the biggest challenge that the destination organizations have. So we're speaking here just about, about our members, just about the destinations, comes back to the question that I was just talking about, which is how do you communicate the impact of the industry? How do you communicate the positive role that the industry has in the destination? And I think that that's made more challenging by any number of other factors. So when there's questions about sustainability, for instance, when there's questions about over tourism or negative impacts of visitation in the destination, then it lands on the destination organization to say, look, travel and tourism or business events, the visitor economy isn't the problem here, and we've got a seat at the table in terms of solving some of these very real problems. But at the end of the day, it's the role of the destination organization to advocate on behalf of the industry, and to find ways to leverage the industry to achieve some of these or to solve some of these challenges. And it's very, very difficult. I mean, we always say we don't own any assets, we don't manage any assets. And so it's not as though, we own the center or we own, the hotels, and we can make changes that actually affect, these sorts of questions. It's our role to have a seat at the table, sort of set that agenda and to work with our stakeholders to mitigate those negative impacts and maximize the positive impacts of the destination of the industry.
Yeah, so you're looking to find solutions to help those who do own or manage assets, right? But you're trying to be a partner in that, in finding those solutions, or at least helping them, kind of guide them in some way. So, wanted to also get your thoughts on the next generations entering the industry, because one of the things that we pick up a lot in terms of trends is this concept that maybe the industry isn't quite as exciting to the younger generations as it could be, and there's sort of challenges in kind of bringing people into the industry. And I just wonder if you could share any thoughts on or advice for people that may be looking at the industry. And I guess in some ways it comes back to the question of communicating the value of the industry, right? Part of that is also communicating why somebody might want to get involved or might want to have a career in this industry. Any thoughts, any advice that you give maybe our younger listeners?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at the end of the day, it's getting out there with the message that travel and tourism has a challenge of dealing with the perception that it's seasonal work, low paying work, low skills work, and that's simply not the case. And that's something that we hear from our members all the time. That comes up in our events. This question of attracting and retaining talent, both at the destination organization, but then within the industry in their destination is a big and ongoing challenge. But I'm optimistic in that regard. I mean, we have for years we've had our 30 under 30 program, and of course PCMA has the 20 to the 20s and others in the industry as well, which are identifying young leaders who are visionaries and bringing a diverse set of skills and enthusiasm to the industry. So we've got programs like that obviously are really exciting, and it's energizing to see the young leaders that are coming up. But at the same time, obviously there are real challenges, and we had an eye-opening experience fairly recently where we went through and looked at alumni through our 30 under 30 program. So the hundreds and hundreds of people that had been identified through that program over the previous 5 or 8 years, and I don't remember the number exactly, but some huge percentage of them no longer worked in the industry. And so if we're losing the best and the brightest, then there is a real problem there and a real disconnect. And so we work with our members, we work with CEOs and senior leaders from our organizations to make room for the next generation. to ensure that they've got a seat at the table, within their organizations. And we also try to create a seat at the table for them, at DI. And so we make a conscious effort to ensure that young voices are heard and reflected in our events. And we feel that's very, very important, not just to give them a platform, but also, of course, to foster them to build their skills and make sure that their voices are heard in the industry.
That's so important. I think it's easy to talk about sort of advice, but if you're not kind of finding a place for younger people in the industry, then it's easy to get discouraged as well. So it's great to hear that you're doing that. So Gabe, thanks for talking us through all this. I think there's some great research here and some great resources. I wanted to get your advice on who else we should have on the podcast. Last question of the show, we always ask our guests to suggest someone else, and hopefully we can have them as a guest and kind of continue the conversations.
Yeah. So, and I think I told you, Miguel. So I was agonizing over this and thinking, okay, who can I bring? Who do I recommend that you haven't already had on the show? But I think, I apologize if it's a little too self-serving, but I think that you should have somebody else from DI, from Destinations International, and that's Emily Schrader, who leads our business event strategy. So she's sort of a one-woman shop in terms of business events at DI, and just a wealth of knowledge, both from her experience in convention sales in Indianapolis, but also as the curator of DI's business events knowledge. She works with our planner influencer board, our large market roundtable, our convention sales committee, and so has access to some of the most brilliant people in the industry, and really just a leader in that space, really innovative thinker, and I think would be a great asset on the podcast. And I think somebody that your listeners would enjoy hearing as well.
Brilliant. Love the recommendation. And it's okay to be self-serving. I think it sounds like she has some really relevant knowledge and she'd be a great guest on the show. Gabe, thank you very much for joining and sharing your insights and sharing all this useful data. And I assume people could reach out to you if they want to know more through LinkedIn, or how can people find you if they want to know more?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Destinationsinternational.org. You'll find everything about DI there. And of course, contact information for our whole team is available there as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being on the show, and good luck with your next ventures in destination organizations.
Thank you, Miguel.